Union and Musicians Village. But in terms of coordinating any of the rest of that, you know, the state comes up with these figures. They're kind of funny. I don't know where they come from, you know. You know, a lot of it is the production self-reporting. So, you know, and of course they want to emphasize because then their tax break is bigger. It's hard to know, you know, and that was the big scandal around Lyft, was that there was no auditing of the books. And so Lyft would claim, you know, they would give away millions in tax credits for productions that never happened, that never invested a single dime or right, it just turned out Blaine Kern got a bunch of tax credits for a Mardi Gras movie that never happened.
The issue on the tax credits is interesting to me because it seems like those taxes would be ones that would have gone to the state. And because it seems like New Orleans gets such a disproportionate share of state dollars, and that they continue to dwindle not only from direct cuts that are going to corporations in our state that continue, that the government is providing for even now, but also because of the disinvestment, which I'm sure there's some better words for it, of like pulling out stuff from New Orleans, whether it's the naval embarkations or whatever is going. So now what we have is with the film economy, okay, that money, I mean, conceptually, what goes to the state that would have come here, but instead wouldn't have come here because the government's making sure of that. And so then we're looking at maybe we do get a net impact from this film industry because of what they actually do spend locally. And then I know that there are a lot of issues with Hollywood South because they don't pay them that. So there's also that cut.
Right. I think you have an excellent point there, because so maybe it is, you know, a way of subverting an inequality within the calculus for the state. I mean, I know that Jefferson County gives a local county tax credit in addition to the state tax credit to encourage folks to film in Metairie. Yeah.
And they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These are great jobs. I mean, Vicki's actually written a book. I ended up reading about the sort of below-the-line workers and how they sort of make it sort of portfolioing one job to another to end up with living in a sort of informal economy. But these truck drivers, for example, that come from California, that's the best, without a doubt, 20 miles ahead of any other Teamster contract in the world. It's the only labor contract I've ever seen that has golden overtime, which is essentially triple overtime that, you know, sort of doubles on top of each other. So if you see them out with a bunch of trucks and it's late at night and it's a Saturday or Sunday, you're watching some people making triple overtime, that pyramids. And this is one thing you know, this, in labor contracts, you always have this thing nobody ever understands about no pyramiding overtime. You can't collect overtime on top of overtime. And, you know, you bargain these contracts for years, and the employers and the unions say, what is, I know we're saying you can't do pyramiding, what is it? Well, it's these Teamster contracts that you have in this one industry. But those are great jobs. So if ever people were able to get on those jobs in New Orleans, I mean,
the shuttle drivers make a bundle too. A guy did his taxes and he said, "You see that man? He makes like a little under $100,000 a year." And he said, for driving the cast and the crew around in circles from the parking lot to the set, a little under $100,000 a year.
And if he's part of the Teamsters contract, yeah, they all are making over $100,000.
I didn't know how.
Oh, yeah, but that's why I think it's so tragic. We're going to have this industry that there's no question on the bottom line. We're subsidizing. We lose money having them come in. So this one may be better than that one, but on overall, I mean, most studies indicate that with a tax subsidy, we're net losers. So it better come back in another way.
Yeah.
And it could come back if people ended up with the jobs, because those jobs, you know, they aren't as consistent as the port as a economy driver or generator, but those could be good jobs for the rest of the city.
Can you argue that in the same way, I mean, I don't know, and I suspect we don't know this since this show is still in production, but could you maybe even argue that, like you said, for Treme is like a loss leader for HBO, maybe Treme the show is a loss leader for the city in that, you know, in terms of the windfall, people purchasing music and wanting to come here or wanting to help out. I mean, I wonder what that will look like in 5-10 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I was going to follow up, but it actually fits excellently to your point, which is that the Confederacy of Cruisers, which is a bike tour company, they're making money and they're doing really well because the kind of person who's interested in a show like Treme is exactly the kind of person who wants to do a bicycle tour of the city and not sit in a little, you know, bus. So, you know, I've talked to some of them, and they've definitely seen a windfall from, you know, the way that the city has been portrayed in the culture, from the kind of tourist that's being hailed in the series.
It's a marvelous point, because we so depend on the volunteers, and you can't imagine how many more years we'll need volunteers since the recovery dollars are being spent in other neighborhoods. And so the newspaper today, the entire French Quarter is virtually being paid. The funds are coming from flooded neighborhoods. That's just one of many cases, a huge project, whether it's a new Landry High School that's been built in operation for a couple of years now on the West Bank that didn't flood. All those funds came from schools that were flooded over here. They're not being rebuilt. So the point that, you know, if the show continues to show our devastation and loss, maybe we can keep the people who are psyched about coming here, and believe me, that they are making decisions every year about whether or not New Orleans is past, you know, that point. Keep them coming back, because that is what it's going to take in many cases to help people just get over enough to get back on the feet.
I'm just curious, folks who haven't spoken up, like, what are your thoughts about the series? Or, I mean, we don't have to talk about economics, that's just my own, you know, little thing, but, you know, I'd love to hear, you know, what your thoughts are about the series. And
well, I was living outside of New Orleans when Katrina happened. Born and raised here, now I'm back. But I was really glad that all of the horrible stuff was on TV after Katrina. You know, that the veil was lifted off of what people typically saw and knew of as New Orleans for everybody in the country. I felt kind of like, well, maybe I can go back now, because being a part of New Orleans was really challenging, because the things that were problems were not being dealt with directly. And I work in public health, and I just felt so unhelpful here. So I left. But then this Treme has done kind of the opposite. I felt really grateful that the characters and the traditions and the music and the real musicians and the real chefs are getting seen across the country, for real. That we're not just the terrible stuff that was so hidden before, but we're also the reasons why people want to go back, or why they can never leave, or why it's called the diaspora, because there's no other place like it. And Treme is really doing that, I think, even though they're not getting everything right, they're really shining a light on some incredible traditions that exist nowhere else in the States, and making them, you know, a point of celebration.
True that.
I cannot remember how, you know, ecstatic I was when it was the second or third show. Coco Roba's show sacrifices the chicken at the WWOZ, and, you know, and the disc jockey is DJ Davis. And I lived in Woodstock before I moved here,